Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Logical Nonsense Podcast. Today, I have a loaded, fun podcast for you. We got One of Wun album review by Gunna, as well as going over a very heated debate, the Apple Music's top 100 albums list. We're going to be going over my thoughts on some of the placements. There's some craziness on this album list, as well as some undeserved albums just in general on the list. So we're going to go through that, as well as finishing off with some NBA playoff action. It's been a loaded conference final so far. Every game I've watched has been pretty fun, other than maybe game 2 of the Celtics versus the Pacers, but even that game was fun to watch. So let's hop right into it. Let's go into the One of Wun album by Gunna. Obviously, this released a few weeks ago, and I just have not been able to get to it. Gunna's been an interesting artist ever since he came out in about around the 2018 range. He was very much so a trap artist, had a very unique sound. I don't know what I expected from Gunna when he came out into the game, but I don't know if I necessarily ever thought that he would be one of the heavy hitters in this game, and he's really hasn't proved that he's going to be, especially with this album. And we'll get into this later a little bit too, but it really does feel like he's stayed pretty static, pretty one-dimensional in the sense that we kind of have seen everything that we need to see from Gunna. He hasn't really challenged himself. There hasn't been much of an evolution. So but first, let's get into the album because the album, it was all right. So let's get right into it. All right, starting with Collage. Starting with Collage, we have an interesting song here. It's very smooth. It's relaxed trap beat. Gunna kind of sounds like nice on this song. This feels like his element, something that we're used to hearing him, but it's also very basic. To me, this is exactly what I would expect when somebody's like, "Yo, is bring me a Gunna type song." This is exactly what I expect. That kind of solid production, solid trap beat. But it's a flow we're used to hearing from Gunna. It's a very catchy kind of very that mumbly kind of sound that we're used to hearing from Gunna. So it's a solid intro. It's nothing too crazy, but then we go into One of Wun, probably one of my favorite songs on the album. I think this is a very classic sounding Gunna, and there's a lot of bad execution within this album, but I think this is an example where he did execute correctly on a trap song. It sounds like a classic trap song from the mid 2010s, and I really like it. It's not lyrical. It's definitely a production sounding song. So if you're looking for a conceptual song, this is not it. But I think there's a lot of energy within the song. There's a lot of substance in what his flows and the beat. I definitely really mess heavy with the beat, and I think it helps make what this song what it is. And it's got a catchy chorus. I think it's just 101 no 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 no. I mean, it's nice. I think it's a very easy song to listen to. So then we go into Neck on a Yacht. Production has a more ferocious, kind of chilling feel to it. I think Gunna matches it with his tone. I don't mind it. It's more of his kind of pimp song, if you will, kind of showing like his the luxuries of being a celebrity and having these women and that kind of thing. And it's got a nice swagger to it. It's a head nodder for sure. I didn't add it to my playlist personally, but I think you could definitely talk about this one being a possible hit on the album, especially considering some of the other songs. So I don't mind Neck on a Yacht. WhatsApp or Wassum. This feels like an Uzi inspired production to me. Kind of got that more, especially Uzi lately. It's got that spacey feel to it. Gunna kind of glides through the beat, and I think he glides through the beat. However, it still isn't something I would necessarily add to my playlist or listen to on a regular basis. It just doesn't feel like anything different from what I have heard from Gunna in the past. The production isn't significant enough for me to want to listen to it on repeat. But it's a fine song. It's very average. It feels like filler to me. And then we go into Hakuna Matata. It's a deep rooted beat. It's got this kind of mysterious element to it. It's kind of a head bopper. He kind of made this song very easy to listen to. That Hakuna Matata. Like that's very catchy. It's a short song. I think if you make this song any longer, it could get annoying. But I think it's the right length of time for this type of song. You know, I'm not a huge fan of these types of like mainstream catchy trap songs usually, but I think this is the right length for me to enjoy this song on a regular basis. So then we go into Pradam. We've heard this song out for a while. I think it's a banger. It's nice. Offset and um, gonna have great chemistry within this song with the way they both go back and forth within their verses. And I think it's this nice, relaxed trap beat that you can, it's super easy to listen to. It's very smooth. They both kind of glide within their energy, which is nice. It's bringing this kind of nostalgic mid 2000s feel to it again. And I also really like the choppy flow with both of them because they both have similar flows on this song and it works really well with the way their voice sounds. So I really appreciate that they kind of both adjusted and adapted to each other's styles on this song and made it a cohesive whole because it sounds very nice together. And you know, it's just one of the catchier songs on the album too. So next, we're gonna go to Trish. I find this song extremely annoying. It's a very annoying rhyme scheme to me. It's got this weird, kind of wild instrument production. I'm not a fan. I think from the production standpoint, from the catchiness, Trish, Trish, like it's just not for me at all. Um, I've heard people like this song. I'm not a fan of it. You know, maybe it's that mainstream kind of hype to it, but I'm just not a fan of this one. On One Tonight, it's got more of a pop trap beat feel to it, and I think you know this is a nice little switch up to the rest of the album because we definitely hear within the first 7 songs, and something I'll talk about later is the production kind of goes in phases, and the first section of the album has very similar sounding production, which isn't abnormal for Gunna. I think that's something that he kind of almost struggles with in some sense because it does feel like okay, we've heard him rap on this type of beat over and over again. And that's something I'd like to see him improve on if he, you know, is looking for the evolution. And he really hasn't. So overall, good song on the album. Back in the A. One of the few productions that I'm really not a fan of. It's got an extremely futuristic beat to it. And it's got this distorted synth. I've voiced that I'm not a fan of this in the past. It's kind of a trendier sound that's coming back into albums over and over again. We saw it in Future's album, we've seen it in other albums. I'm not a fan of the distorted synth. I don't think it sounds good. I don't care who is on that type of beat. It doesn't sound good. The synth is too almost annoying or too distracting from the song to make it sound good. And it's not catchy. It's just kind of there. It just feels like filler. This is not one of my favorite songs on the album. One of my least favorite to be sure. Trio, you know, again, kind of more of a space feely. This is where we kind of once we go into Trish and then on up until about Still Prevail, we hear these techno electronic beats, and this is another one. We hear this space feeling production. It's a lot of talk rap, which not a fan of. You know, I hear Gonna use this type of flow from time to time, and I think this is where he kind of almost struggles a little bit when he tries to bring in this flow. He doesn't have like this nice, solid sounding voice that he can get away with it. EO, Elon, like it's just weird bars and they don't really match. It's just very awkward sounding song in my opinion from top to bottom. And a minute 56, like why even add it if it's gonna be this weird of a song? So I'm not a fan of Trio. Going to Still Prevail, very repetitive song. It's got a very repetitive hook, very repetitive chorus throughout. And it's almost too low key in the sense that there's not enough substance. It's kind of got this boring energy to it. There's nothing too unique about this song. I'm not saying it's a bad song. To me, though, it's just kind of there. It's one of those songs that you hear on the album, you don't necessarily need to skip, but I don't necessarily remember it after either. Going to Blackjack, lot of mumbling on this song. I think this is where we hear the critics come out on Gunna and say, you know, this is that mumble rap that we're not a fan of, and reasonably so. You hear it a lot in this song, a lot of rambling verses. You know, I think that's something Gunna struggles with a little bit too. Is he kind of just rambles on these random bars that I don't necessarily know are clever or witty or make sense. I like Gunna. I sound like a Gunna hater right now, but you know, he is what he is. He kind of, you know, if you're looking for substance, if you're looking for concepts, it's not him, and that's fine. But you know, when it comes to rating an album, I have to rate you down because you're not that conceptually complex individual. You're not bringing me a unique style that I've heard before. I know exactly what to expect from you, and that's exactly what we got on this album. Going to Triple Dollar Sign. This is by far one of the weirdest songs on the album. Weird piano beat, extremely weird vocals brought in from Normani and Gunna. The melodies on this are not good at all. It's just a very awkward song. Probably one of the worst songs I've heard from Gunna, if I'm being honest. And this beat just does not work well with any of it. It's just all around bad song. Going to Clear My Rain. I think this is my favorite song on the album. One of Wun, I mentioned. I liked Prada Dem, Hakuna Matata. This song is something I really would like to see. This is when I talk about glimpses of potential from Gunna. This is something I'd love to see more. He brings this emotional sounding flow to him, this emotional sounding melody to him, and it just you can hear the passion in his voice, and that's something like in general in rap that I want to see. Like I want to see that passion from hip hop artists. You know, you're making your music, make it sound like you are saying what you mean. And I think on this song you hear it. And I really, really mess with that. I really mess with the Leon Bridges feature on this. I think they have good chemistry. And this is a good example of what he can do and what his evolution could be. He doesn't show it all throughout the album, which I think is an improvement. But just great ability to switch from melodies back into rapping. And he has a good raspiness to his voice that kind of adds to that element of almost emotional and emotional in the sense of being like deep rooted and this is going to sound weird, but deep rooted and almost like testosterone, you know, like I'm a man, but you know, I got this emotion, I got this passion about me. So I thought that was cool. I thought that was a cool, unique feature all about the album. Going to Conscious, you know, talking about his come up, and now that he's made it, he has a lot on his mind. I think he's attempting to tell stories, and that's really cool. And it's not too shabby. I mean, he still has his cringy bars within the lines, and you know, I think that's something I struggle with when I talk about lyrics later. But at least he's attempting to do it. But you know, I think he has a really cool transition. But the next song transition and the next song sounds very, very similar in the sense of the way they sound phonetically. And then you know, going to the Time, another more lyrical story, but not executed super great in my opinion. Not as great as Conscious. It is one of the more vulnerable songs, but the chorus is just meh for me. It's very basic, and it's just kind of a basic song. I think while I appreciate him trying to be vulnerable, trying to bring out that emotional side of him and challenging himself, I don't, you know, I am all for experimenting, but it needs to be executed correctly. I've preached that so many times on this podcast platform. Execute it correctly. If you're going to challenge yourself, execute it correctly. The people that execute it correctly and consistently when they're experimenting are the people who get praised. This is not something that should get praised in my opinion. Going to Let It Breathe, featuring Roddy Ricch. Very interesting song. I've listened to this a few times. I've listened to this album a few times now. I've had a chance. I actually don't mind the Gunna verse on here. It's actually the Roddy Ricch verse that I have an issue with. I think it's grown on me. The first listen, I really, really didn't like it. It's grown on me. I think Roddy Ricch, it's grown on me, but it does kind of. I mean, the first few listens kind of sound a little boring to me in the energy that he brings. I think the second listen, I can kind of appreciate kind of the mood or tone that he brings in sense of that it's kind of this casual, more relaxed tone. Still not a huge fan of the song, and it's not added to my playlist by any means, but still a solid song overall. Going to Life's Changing, I find this melody highly annoying. I think this is not it. It's not catchy. It's just a awkward song, and it doesn't have a good story to it. It's just, yeah. Moving on. Going to Today I Did Good. This is a dope song. It's very relaxed. It's very smooth. It's got this subtle sample in the back that I think is nice to listen to. And it's an enjoyable song overall. I think the way Gunna uses his tone on this song to reflect his energy, to reflect his passion is, again, nice. A very, it's a highlight on the album, in my opinion. I didn't add it, but I think it's still a solid song. And, maybe on a few more listens, maybe that's something I do add. Time Reveals, Be Careful What You Wish For. It's kind of an emotional song slash beat, kind of. It's interesting because I always look back into the lyrics more on these types of songs, and it's not as deep as you would think. I think, something that I mentioned he kind of struggles with is he still has his cringy bars. He still has kind of his old ways within the storytelling. And it's kind of hard to give credit, but I also got to give credit because, he's trying it. He's doing a decent job at it. And the first part is pretty nice. It's catchy. It's got this catchy melody, good story. Then there's this beat switch up, and it's, All right, getting to our logic method of rating. First, starting off with the lyrics. This has glimpses of ability to show storytelling, as I mentioned. I think there's times where I look at this and I'm like, it's all right. It's all right. But there's other times where he kind of falls back into his stereotype of what he's always been and what he always raps about. And that's always talking about the, kind of the gnarly graphic sexual scenes, which when you dig deep into the lyrics, you'll find those. And some of them are just gnarly, talking about shooting cum into a girl's spine. Like, what the hell, man? Like, I get it, but like, what the hell? And then talking about, money, of course, and the luxuries of being a celebrity and being rich. And then of course, like always, the gang related stuff, which is like completely fine, totally, like that's that's rap, that's hip hop, right? Like that's a common those are all three common subjects, but I think there's something about not allowing it to, I guess, become cringy. And I think they do become cringy, and that's where I fault him. So for that, I'm gonna give him a 5 out of 10. Not a great score, but I think I have to. I mean, it's just not lyrically a good album. On point production, classic sounding Gunna. Classic sounding trap in the sense. In the first segment, I would say first 7 or 8 songs of the album, and it kind of almost makes it hard to show the distinctions between the songs. It kind of meshes together. There's of course Proud of Them and One of Wun within those. And you could even argue, I don't even know if Hakuna Matata is that much different, but you have those songs and they kind of like, if you just listen to straight production on those songs and nothing else, they sound very similar. And it almost makes me wonder how much is he challenging himself on those productions. He does switch it up. He has this period of time where he has these really awkward techno electronic beats, which I'm also not a fan of. Take it as you will. You can either have your classic, what you would expect from Gunna when he selects a beat, or you can have this awkward sounding technology, energy, or electronic beat. That's interesting. And then he gets into the more emotional songs that are much more slower, maybe more laid back. Do I like these? They're all right. There's nothing too crazy about them. There's so much better production that we've heard this year, though. And considering that, I have to give this, a very average rating. It's just not my favorite production choices that I've heard. It's not something that's like, wow, man, So I'm gonna go 6.1 out of 10. Glorious flows. While it comes off as mumble rap to most, I actually think Gunna has underrated skills as somebody with flow. I think he has an ability to show unique melodies. There's some cool melodies that I thought he brought on. I think that his like signature flow in general is just very, very easy to listen to because he's somebody that kind of glides through, and he's somebody that you almost listen to the flow more so than the lyrics. If you're not a lyrics guy, I think he's has a lot of hits because of his flow personally. So I think his flow underrated and something that makes him a good rapper in the sense of making hits. 7.2 out of 10. Immediate hits. 20 songs. How many are actually hits on this album? You could argue as many as 7, in my opinion. At most, I think there's 7 hits. I think there's as little as 3 or 4, maybe 5 at most. That's not a good fraction. Immediate hits for me, I'm gonna rank that 5.5 out of 10. Going to content matter, I think Gunna did try to attempt to evolve himself or experiment in a sense of getting out of his normal structure, but I don't think he did it enough, if that makes sense. I think he stuck to his comfort zone within the first 7, 8 songs. Then we saw some experimentation with different production that wasn't executed correctly. And then the last however many songs were more vulnerable songs. I think he struggled through, if I'm being honest. I don't think he executed those well as well. The content matter to me is very average again. There hasn't been an evolution within Gunna. And I think that's something that as an artist, for me to consider him one of the best in the game, we need to see that. That's something that is very essential in being a hip hop artist, is being able to evolve and maintain different traits. It's just how it works. And he hasn't done that, giving that a 6.5 out of 10 for an overall score of 6.2 out of 10 on this album. As always, if you disagree with me, totally fine. Make sure to let me know where you disagree with me and listen to this album for yourself and have your own opinion. Now, going to a more interesting topic, we are going to be talking about Apple Music's top 100 albums list. It's gotten a lot of attention, and it's definitely something I want to talk about. Starting first, and I'm just going to be talking about the hip hop albums. So, starting first with Astro World 98. Very interesting to me. A lot of people love this album. A lot of people think it's very influential, maybe rightfully so, right? But I personally feel like this isn't even Travis Scott's best album. I think Rodeo is better. And personally, as a personal favorite, I personally like Utopia better as well. Astro World is not my favorite. I think while it did have a lot of success, I think it's very so. It might just be too poppy for me, but I just don't think from the content matter it is his best album. And so for Rodeo to not get on here, but Astro World too, I don't know about that. And there's plenty of albums. Is Astro World better than 2014 Forest Hills Drive? In my opinion, no. Is Astro World better than swimming? I don't think so. Is Astro World even better than Circles? Maybe a hot take. I don't think so. Is Astro World better than 1999 by Joey Badass? I don't think so. There's plenty of albums on here that got missed that I think are better than Astro World. And I think that it's not even Travis Scott's best album. All right, so going to our next hip hop album, Flower Boy 92. I actually like this pick. I think it's one of Tyler's best albums that he's ever put out. And it really was kind of the turn in Tyler's career of what he's done. I think it definitely was the start of seeing that maybe Tyler the Creator does have more influence than we're giving him credit for. I like this placement. I think, I don't think it's like one of the best albums of all time, but I do think it's one of the better albums of all time. So 92 I'm okay with. Doggy Style. Interesting that this made it, in my opinion. I think, yes, it's, is it Snoop Dogg's best? Absolutely. I think it's a very West Coast cool album in general. Very influential in terms of West Coast sound. It's interesting that it's made it because I don't necessarily think of Doggy Style as being one of the best albums in the hip hop game of all time, but I respect it. Do I think it's better than Astroworld? Probably. Do I think it's better than Flower Boy? I don't know. It's debatable. It just depends on what you value. So I don't mind it. But I also wouldn't have been upset if it wasn't on the list at all. So going to Get Rich or Die Trying at 82. This one's gotten a lot of head turned. Get Rich or Die Trying. Do I think it deserves to be on this list? Yes, but I actually think it should have been in the 90s. While I love how many hits are on this album, there's plenty of ferocious, just hard, cutthroat bars on this that I think are so memorable within gangster rap and so influential, and it's 50 Cent's best. Do I think it's one of the best hip hop albums of all time? Maybe. I don't know. But I think it should be more towards that 90 range, probably, for me. Going to Eminem's Marshall Mathers LP. This is way too up there. Marshall Mathers LP, I think, is one of Eminem's best albums, if not his best. And I think it deserves more credit. Talk about influence on the hip hop game. This was shock rap. This was shock rap at its finest. This was Eminem at his peak. And Eminem is one of the most highly regarded rappers, and because of this album, reasonably so. Super Duper Fly by Missy Elliott. Low key, I'm glad that it got on this list, and I'm glad it got the credit that it deserves, because I think Missy Elliott in general just doesn't get the credit she deserves as a hip hop artist. So I'm glad with this placement. Some people think it should have been maybe higher on the list, maybe in the 60s, maybe in the 50s, but I'm glad that it just made it in general. Going to Straight Outta Compton by NWA. I think, talk about groups in hip hop and this album, it's a great album. Is it conceptually like crazy or anything like that? No. So some people are really mad at how low it is at 70. I don't mind the placement. I think it's correctly placed. It's influential. It's got some really, really memorable songs. Some of the most iconic songs come from this album. But again, it's nothing like where I sit back and I'm just like in awe. Like, it's, to me, it's nothing where like it made me really think on a deeper level of wow, like that's just nuts, right? 3 Feet High and Rising, De La Soul. De La Soul, again, thank God. Thank you for giving them credit. Some people are mad that it didn't get more credit. Maybe reasonably so, but overall, I think it's just good that they got on this list. All Eyes on Me by Tupac. I think this should have been higher. All Eyes on Me is a great album, and I think it's Tupac's best. you know, is this something that I think should be like top 20? No, some people are saying it should be. It's a classic album for sure, but overall, nothing too crazy. Take Care by Drake. This is an interesting one, especially because I know Nothing Was the Same was not on this list. Do I think it's Drake's best album? I think it's arguable that it is. I have a very much different opinion than most, and one that I almost don't even want to argue with people about because no one's going to believe me. Take Care is probably Drake's objectively best album. Not objectively, subjectively best album, maybe one or two. But do I think it should be 47 best albums of all time across all genres? No. This should be in the 90s. This is on a level of, or I think 80s. 80s is maybe a little better. It's melodic. It's got good hits, but it's nothing. It's nothing that I think is a top 50 album of all time by any means. Quemini, this, if you're gonna pick an Outkast album, is definitely the one you want to pick. Should it be higher? I think there's an argument. I think it could be in the 30s, but 41 is overall a solid pick. Illmatic at 39. Now, this is absolutely tragic. I don't care what genre you're in. This is something that will put you through an experience lyrically, conceptually, as well as the production. It is a tone setter and atmosphere maker, and something that I think is one of the best albums of all time across all genres. The fact that this is at 39 is absolutely bombastic. I think it's freaking crazy that Apple isn't giving this album the credit it is. It is one of the most highest regarded albums in hip hop history for a reason. When people talk about Nas, whether you like him or not, you have to give him his flowers for this album. Some people are like, oh, it's too highly regarded. Go listen to it. Just genuinely just listen to it in a room alone. Tell me how you feel, because I guarantee you're gonna feel like, wow, this is nuts to me. And it's especially nuts because I think it's way better than 36 Chambers, and 36 Chambers should be higher too. Both of these albums should be top 15 at least. At least 36 Chambers, probably one of the best group hip hop albums we've ever heard in the classic hip hop era. So I definitely got to give it to Wu-Tang on this one. I think it should have been higher. Public Enemy, it takes the nations of millions to hold us back. I like Public Enemy, but when you look at some of the albums that are behind it, such as Illmatic, such as 36 Chambers, even something like All Eyes on Me, I think those are all three better albums than what Public Enemy put out here. So that's probably just me personally, though. Number 32, we've got Ready to Die, another album that I think could easily be in the top 20. Do I think Ready to Die is better than 36 Chambers or Illmatic? Definitely not over Illmatic. I think there's an argument for 36 Chambers, but I'm glad it's on this list. Again, I think it should be top 20. And here's what pisses me off about like Marshall Mathers LP, 36 Chambers, Illmatic, Ready to Die, of these not being placed higher, is I love Billie Eilish. I don't talk about other genres very often, but Billie Eilish being above these types of albums to me is absolutely crazy. This hasn't had any time to age really, and we're considering this number 30 of all time best albums. Like, there's no way. Absolutely not. So, Tribe Called Quest, the Low End Theory. I actually like this placement. I think this is one of the coolest and most influential albums for jazz rap. So I'm glad that it's on this list. My Beautiful Twisted Dark Fantasy. People are saying, I wish, why isn't there more Kanye albums? I see why they did it. I think when you look at, if you're going to pick a Kanye album and you think about his peak, some people would like to see, College Dropout or Late Registration. Maybe so. Maybe you include all three. I think there's an argument to include all three, or even Graduation. I think that 3-album run, honestly, is probably better than My Beautiful Twisted Dark Fantasy. I think there's an argument for it. But this was kind of the cherry on top. This was when you look at in terms of mainstream, right? When Kanye was at his peak in terms of mainstream numbers, this is the album that speaks volumes, and that's why it's here. But I think there's an argument that and I understand why people are upset with this being over some of the others. But again, back to my point, is My Beautiful Twisted Dark Fantasy better than 36 Chambers or Illmatic or Ready to Die? I don't think so. Then we go to The Chronic by Dr. Dre, another interesting one. I think The Chronic, great for gangster rap. I think it's legendary, and there's some really, really great tracks on this album. I sound like a broken record. Why is it over some of these other gangster rap albums that I think are executed better? Especially when you have 1989 and 18. Come on. Really? Come on now. Adele, 21. Come on now. Blueprint at 13. Very interesting to me. Some people don't even think this is his best album. I think it's probably one of his best. Jay-Z's a masterpiece, though. I don't mind it here. I don't mind it here. It might be a little high, but I don't mind it. Good Kid, Mad City at number 7. Very interesting. Another album that was snubbed off this list completely. To Pimp a Butterfly. Like, are you kidding me? To Pimp a Butterfly isn't on here, but Good Kid, Mad City is. Good Kid, Mad City, they both deserve to be on here. Let's be honest. I think if you're gonna put this at 7, you better have To Pimp a Butterfly at number 6, and they didn't. Absolutely nuts. To Pimp a Butterfly, a lot of people say, "Oh, it's overhyped now." No, it's not. Conceptually, no, it's not. Not even close. This is one of the most conceptually advanced albums of all time, and Good Cat, Mad City is too. And it's got a lot of hits and it's more mainstream worthy, but To Pimp a Butterfly is just as good, if not better. Then we go to Blonde at number 5. Very interesting ranking. Very interesting. And then here we go, going to our final segment. We have just the NBA playoffs in general. First, I want to talk about this Minnesota Timberwolves versus Dallas Mavericks series. It's been interesting. I think you look at what Luka and Kyrie have been doing, and it's pretty nuts. And it's also very interesting that the Timberwolves can't close out a game. I think they had an opportunity to win in game 1. They got hot towards the end of the game. They couldn't finish it out, and vice versa. Last night, Anthony Edwards made a crucial turnover at the end of the game, and it was very, very costly. We always praise Anthony Edwards, and reasonably so. He's had a great season. He has a great year. We talk about how this kid's going to be the next big thing. These are the types of turnovers you can't have in games. These are the memories we can't have in games. I know we love to have short-term memory on people we like, but that kind of turnover at the end of the game was so unnecessary, so unneeded. Like, I hate this type of basketball, but literally stall. You are up. There's no reason to force anything. Try to force something. Try to be playing hero ball. As somebody as young as him, understand why it happened, but he needs to understand he can't let that happen in future, and I hope he learns from it. There's obviously still a whole series to be played, but the Mavs are up 2-0, and I think it is – there's a big reason why. And I think this Mavs team has extremely good chemistry. You talk about teams that just look good together on the floor, and the Mavs are one of those teams. They have looked like they have wanted to be there since day one. And this is the happiest I've seen Kyrie on the floor. I know that sounds weird to say, but Kyrie looks like he wants to be there. He's doing things hustle stats wise that are really great. He's playing really great defense. He's stepping up on offense when need be, supporting Luka in the backcourt. I love what Kyrie has been looking like. I also love what the Mavs bigs have been doing. Gafford, Lively, they've all been contributing in different ways. The only big I don't love is Maxi Kleber. Whatever. We're not going to get down that road. I think the Mavs have been looking good, and they've been closing games out really well. I wouldn't be surprised if this Mavs team closes it out. Obviously, we've seen the Timberwolves can come back after they came back from the Nuggets, which is still insane to me that they completed that. But, they can get hot, and they can, so you can never rule them out. Mish, stop. So you can never rule them out, and I'm excited to see what the rest of this series has to hold, because we've had 2 really, really crazy great games from the Mavs and the Timberwolves. Next, I want to go to the Celtics versus the Pacers. Obviously, tonight, Tyrese Halliburton went down in game 2 and was not able to play tonight. This team, they had a chance to win tonight, and I think, because they didn't win tonight, I don't think there's a path where they can win.
They're down 3-0. The Celtics have looked solid. Jaylen Brown has been somebody that has impressed the hell out of me in games 1 and 2. Drew Holiday, this game stepped up a lot on defense. Maybe not as much as the box score will say. Stepped up a lot in clutch moments too. You know, that steal at the end of the game in game 3 was huge. Game 2, the Celtics kind of not blew them out of the water, but definitely were in control the whole game. And game 1, the Celtics were able to somehow pull it off after kind of looking sloppy and then getting into overtime and pulling one away. So the theme for the Celtics is they keep finding ways to win. The Pacers feel like they are losing steam while they are a Cinderella team and feel like they shouldn't be there. Kind of feels like their run is coming to an end just because the Celtics are so great and their roster is so deep. So I love what the Celtics are doing in this playoffs. I think they're using their depth. They believe in their team. And, you know, whether it's Tatum, whether it's Brown, it doesn't matter. This team just will step up in different ways. And I'm excited. I think they are the best team left. But I do think whether it's the Mavs, whether it's Timberwolves, they will give them a run for their money. And I'm excited to see how the Celtics respond to that. You know, they've been tested over and over again, and sadly, they have failed in the past. How have they learned from that experience, and what will they do this year? So stay tuned. Not a very long sports section, but definitely a lot to talk about in hip hop. Make sure to hit a follow, subscribe button. I appreciate you guys listening, tuning in. Some big news coming up because we have episode 75. May have another live streamed event, so stay tuned for that. I appreciate you guys.